All right, so it looks like a lot of you are going to be dealing with some serious snow. We're going to be diving into a whole bunch of weather warnings today. And let me tell you, it's shaping up to be a pretty wild ride by Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. We've got reports coming in from all over British Columbia, the Midwest, and it's looking like a lot of people are going to be doing some digging out come Thursday.
It's really something to see all these storms hitting so many different places all at once. It's almost like, winter decided to throw a big continent-wide snow party.
And you were kind enough to RSVP as our expert guide to this winter wonderland. So first up on the itinerary, it looks like the Coquihalla Highway in British Columbia. Environment Canada's already issued a winter storm warning. And they're not messing around 30 centimeters of snow. I can practically hear those snow plows revving up already.
Oh, yeah, they're going to need to be ready. This isn't just some casual snowfall. It's a full-blown weather system, and it's sweeping across the entire southern interior region of British Columbia. And you throw in strong winds on top of that, and you're talking, severely reduced visibility for anyone who's brave enough to be on the roads.
Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for disaster to me.
The warning also mentioned the potential for freezing rain, which honestly gives me chills just thinking about it. Isn't freezing rain, even more dangerous than snow in some ways?
Oh, absolutely. Freezing rain, it's deceptively dangerous, because it just looks like regular rain. But when it hits the ground, instant ice. And that creates a layer of ice that is just so slippery, it's a nightmare for drivers.
Yeah.
Because it's almost impossible to control your car when you're driving on ice. If you ever get caught in freezing rain, honestly, the best thing to do is just pull over and wait it out. Okay, noted. Now let's hop over to the Midwest. It looks like the Twin Cities in Minnesota and a huge swath of the surrounding area are in for it as well. The National Weather Service has issued a winter storm warning for, well, let me take a deep breath here. Douglas, Todd, Morrison, The Locks, Kennebec, Stearns, Benton, Sherburne, Isanti, Chisago, Wright, Hennepin, Anoka, Ramsey, Washington, Carver, Scott, Aindy, Dakota counties. Did I miss any?
I think you got them all.
Yeah.
That's a pretty impressive list. It really highlights how widespread this storm is, They're saying the snow will probably start Wednesday night and continue right through Thursday with total accumulations of 5 to 7 inches. Not quite as dramatic as the Coquihalla Highway, but still enough to cause some headaches for sure.
Right. Speaking of headaches, one of our sources, Bring Me the News, mentioned something that kind of piqued my curiosity. They said that the snow-to-liquid ratios might be a bit off, potentially underestimating the actual snowfall. Now, I'm no meteorologist, but that sounds like it could throw a wrench into a lot of people's plans. What does that even mean for people on the ground?
Basically, it means they might wake up to a lot more snow than they were expecting. You see, predicting snow, it's tricky business. It's not as simple as just looking at, how much moisture is in the air. You've got to factor in temperature, wind, elevation, and a whole bunch of other variables.
So even with all our fancy technology, Mother Nature can still throw us a curveball, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes those predictions are spot on.
Cool.
And other times, well, let's just say it's a good idea to have a backup shovel handy.
Good point.
Yeah.
Our next stop on our winter storm tour, Wisconsin. The National Weather Service has issued a winter storm warning for Wausau and a few surrounding counties: Marathon, Portage, Waushara, and Wood. Looks like they're looking at 5 to 8 inches of snow. But what really caught my eye was the mention of even higher accumulations near Lake Michigan. Is that some kind of lake effect magic going on there?
It is. Lake effect snow. It's a really fascinating phenomenon. Basically what happens is when cold air blows over a relatively warm body of water, like one of the Great Lakes, it picks up moisture as it goes. And then as that air rises and cools, the moisture condenses and forms clouds. And guess what? Those clouds dump snow on the downwind side of the lake.
So living near a Great Lake in winter is kind of like having your own personal snow machine.
Kind of. It can make a huge difference in snowfall totals, that's for sure. You could have one town buried in snow, and then a few miles away, another town might have just a light dusting. It all depends on which way the wind is blowing.
Talk about location, location, location. Before we move on to the practical stuff, there are a few other spots mentioned in the news I want to touch on quickly. Menominee County in Michigan is bracing for 4 to 6 inches, with the potential for 6 to 8 inches in some areas. Brainerd, Minnesota could see 4 to 7 inches. And some seriously treacherous travel conditions. And we've got a whole bunch of other towns in Minnesota: Alexandria, Ashby, Barrett, Elbow Lake, Fergus Falls, Long Prairie, Parkers Prairie, and St. Cloud, all expecting 4 to 7 inches. Phew! That's a lot of snow. Now, I know you've got some wisdom to impart on how to handle all this winter weather. So what's the first thing people in these areas should be thinking about?
Well, before we get into the practicalities, I think it's worth pausing for a second and considering that while snow can be, beautiful and even fun, these storms can also be disruptive and even dangerous. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers, inches of snow, wind speeds, but we should never forget that these are powerful natural events, and they demand our respect.
That's a really good point. It's easy to forget that when you're cozy inside with a cup of hot cocoa.
Exactly. So before you get too comfy, let's talk about what you can do to stay safe and minimize any disruptions. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that travel is going to be very tricky, especially during Thursday morning and evening commutes.
Yeah, so if you can avoid being on the roads during those times, that's probably a good idea. But I know that's not always possible. What about people who just absolutely have to travel?
Well, if you absolutely have to venture out, make sure your vehicle is properly equipped, good tires, plenty of tread, a full tank of gas, and don't forget an emergency kit. Pack things like a flashlight, extra batteries, non-perishable food and water,
Hmm.
and warm clothing, blankets. You just never know how long you might be stuck if there's like an accident or a road closure.
Yeah, that's reminding me of this one time I got stranded on the highway during a blizzard a few years back.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Felt like I was stuck there forever.
Right.
So what else should people be thinking about in terms of preparation?
Well, power outages. Those are a real possibility during winter storms. So it's always a good idea to have some backup options. Make sure your cell phone is fully charged, have flashlights and candles handy, and if you can, you might even consider investing in a portable power station. And listen, if you rely on any medical equipment that requires electricity, make sure you have a plan in place in case the power goes out.
It's amazing how a little bit of snow can make you realize how dependent you are on electricity. It's also a good reminder to check on your neighbors, especially if they're elderly or have mobility issues.
Oh, absolutely. A little bit of community support can go a long way during these kinds of events. And of course, staying informed is crucial. You got to keep an eye on the latest weather forecasts, road conditions. You can use websites like 511 or 511melon.org to get real-time updates on road closures and travel advisories.
All this talk about preparation has got me wondering, does all this snow mean we're in for like a really long, harsh winter?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer. Weather forecasting is a complex business, and predicting those long-range patterns, even trickier. But I will say this. These early season storms, they're a good reminder that winter is officially here, and we need to be prepared for whatever it throws our way.
Okay, so maybe we can't predict the entire winter, but we can definitely prepare for the storms that are on the horizon. And speaking of horizons, I can't help but think about the bigger picture here. We've been talking about these specific winter storms, but how does all this snow fit into the larger context of, climate change?
Ah, the million-dollar question. That's a topic that's debated a lot, and it's important to approach it with some nuance. It's easy to think that more snow means climate change is a hoax, but the reality is much more complex than that.
So more snow doesn't necessarily mean that climate change isn't happening.
Exactly. Climate change is about more than just rising temperatures. It's about shifts in weather patterns, increased frequency of extreme events, and disruptions to the delicate balance of, well, our entire planet's systems. And while it might seem counterintuitive, some scientists believe that climate change could actually lead to more intense snowstorms, at least in certain regions.
Hold on, I got to wrap my head around this. How could a warmer planet lead to more snow?
It really comes down to a few factors. As the Earth's atmosphere warms up, it can hold more moisture. And what happens when that moisture-laden air collides with cold air masses? You guessed it, snow.
So it's like a giant atmospheric snowball fight.
In a way, yeah, but it's not all fun and games. These more intense snowstorms, they can have serious consequences. They can lead to power outages, transportation disruptions, and even flooding as the snow melts.
And I imagine they could also have significant ecological impacts, right?
Absolutely. Everything's connected. These heavier snowfalls can affect wildlife populations. They can disrupt plant life cycles. They can even alter the timing of spring runoff, which of course has implications for water resources and ecosystems.
Wow. It's incredible how something as seemingly simple as a snowstorm can have such far-reaching consequences. It really underscores the interconnectedness of our planet's systems, doesn't it?
It does, and it's a reminder that climate change is a global issue with local impacts. We need to be thinking about both the immediate challenges of these winter storms and the long-term implications of a changing climate.
You've given us a lot to think about. Before we wrap up, I'm sure our listeners are wondering what they can do, besides stocking up on supplies and checking on their neighbors. to address this larger issue of climate change?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And it can feel honestly kind of overwhelming. But the good news is that there are things we can all do. On an individual level, I think it starts with just awareness and making conscious choices.
Yeah, like trading in that gas guzzler for a more fuel-efficient car.
Yeah.
Or, taking public transportation whenever possible.
Exactly. And there are so many other ways we can, reduce our carbon footprint. Everything from being mindful of our energy consumption at home to supporting businesses that are prioritizing sustainability.
It's all about those little everyday actions adding up to make a big difference, right?
Absolutely. But individual action is only part of the solution. We also need systemic change. We need to be advocating for policies that promote renewable energy, invest in green infrastructure, and hold industries accountable for their environmental impact.
So it's about using our voices and our votes to push for a more sustainable future.
Exactly. It's about, engaging in conversations about climate change, supporting organizations that are working on solutions, and making sure that our elected officials are prioritizing this issue.
It's funny how we started with a, pretty specific deep dive into these winter storms, and we ended up having this broader conversation about climate change.
It's all connected, isn't it? These storms are a reminder that climate change isn't some, distant threat. It's happening now, and it's affecting all our lives in very real ways.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
Me too. The key takeaway here is that we're not powerless, We're not powerless in the face of these challenges. We can prepare for these storms. We can make choices that reduce our impact on the planet, and we can work together to create a more sustainable future for everyone.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this snowy deep dive. Stay warm out there, stay safe, and stay engaged.
And remember, every snowflake makes a difference.